Hello, everybody. I'm Jennifer Bloom, host of Soul Wisdom Abundance, Create Wealth Through Spiritual Health. I'm thrilled that you are here. And if you're here for the first time, I'm honored that you're taking the opportunity to listen. And, if you get a chance, we've got a number of episodes already recorded that you might be interested in perusing. So I'll give you that opportunity. But just as a reminder, this podcast is all about learning how to work with money in a brand new way, in a way that we haven't really done on the planet for a very long time, and that is to really focus on the money relationship and to begin to understand that money has its roots in divinity, and that when we look at the money relationship, which is the relationship between us and the divine and money itself, now you have an opportunity to start to work with money in ways you never have before, to be able to create a flow of money that comes with some freedom and with some choices, and in lots of fun ways. But the thing that we need to remember, as I do a lot of talking about soul and divinity, but we are not just soul. We're not just divinity. We have these human cloaks that we have, and we have DNA that runs through us, and that DNA is full of all kinds of not only our experiences, but experiences from people who have come before. And I'm thrilled to have our guest here today because I the impact that our ancestors have on our day-to-day living is not something that I was aware of, at least not as full of awareness as when I had the opportunity to have a session with Dr. Monique. And it's really amazing how much as I said, how much impact there is from those who have come before us, and really on that day-to-day living, there's a lot of opportunity to work with. So, without any further ado, let me introduce our guest today. So, this is Dr. Monique Hunt. I'm so glad you're here, and let me just tell people a little bit about you. So, Dr. Monique Hunt is a spiritual teacher and founder of the Ancestor Wisdom School. She is a master ancestral story clearing practitioner who uses the healing power of your life stories and your ancestors' guidance to help you create a clear path for living your soul's purpose. She uses her gifts as an ancestor griot, which I'm going to have to ask you what that means,
Okay.
and third generation intuitive to help you release historical grief and blocks embedded in your DNA and passed down through your lineage. So, Dr. Monique, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I always enjoy talking to you. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah, I think it is. So, I want to start, I was thinking about this. I want to start by saying a little bit about what we're not talking about. So we're not talking about past life healing here, correct?
No,
Yeah,
no,
this is something completely
completely
different.
different. Yes.
Yeah. So if you would, why don't you give us just a little bit of an overview about what it is that what it means to work with our ancestors?
So our ancestors have passed down their DNA to us. Obviously, we know that. Well, within that are the traumas in the wounds, the wisdom, the courage, and all of the beautiful things that come along with it. So we receive them from generation to generation to generation. And when we don't clear those wounds, when we don't clear those traumas and those stories that contain those wounds and traumas, then they show up in every generation, life after life after life. And people begin to experience these real challenging moments in their lives, and sometimes their inability to overcome things. Or in this case, we're talking about money. They may not understand why they don't have a flow of opportunities to create money, or create an income, or maybe business isn't flowing the way they want it to flow, or perhaps there's a situation where you get the money and then it just flows back out. You're not able to hold on to it, and you don't
Right.
understand why. Or maybe even for some people it may be that they've earned it and then lost it some kind of way. And if we look back over their lineage, we will often find stories that relate to the experiences that people are having in their current lives. And that is where we look and we see the traumas and the wounds and the different stories around those that are impacting how we respond to situations now. Does that mean that we won't have any challenges in our life? Absolutely not. We do have challenges, and there are great opportunities for growth and that kind of thing, but it does mean that when you clear those stories from your ancestral lineage, then what you give yourself is the best foundation for moving through those challenges at a very quick pace and being able to understand the lessons that are within the challenge and be able to move on from it very rapidly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you're speaking about it, I'm thinking, okay, so it would be as if you were trying to run a race, but you have these band-aids all over you, right? That are sort of, and things are kind of festering underneath, but you just don't even know that you're there, right? That those wounds are there, and as you run, you're hurting, and you just can't quite get there. Um, and but once you open up those band-aids and take a look at what's inside and get that clear, now you have the freedom to do your training. You have the freedom to drink your water, have the food, and have that create an impact on your system so that you can run that race. Is that a
Correct.
fair analogy?
That is a fair analogy. It really is. And what's important is that we not only look at the wounds and the traumas, but let's look at the courage, the
Yeah.
resilience, the guidance that they can give us. So if you have a friend that has had, that has run a race and won a race, right?
Yeah.
They probably can come and tell you some do's and don'ts about running that race, about the pace you should go, about how you should go about doing it. Well, that's what our ancestors offered too. So when our ancestors have experienced some of the things that we're experiencing, not only can we help clear those stories for them so that they don't get passed down from generation to generation and they stop with us, we also can embrace the guidance and the wisdom that they have and their ability to open doors for us where we think they're closed.
That's so fascinating. So fascinating. So, how does somebody know that a challenge that they're facing might be being impacted by these ancestral traumas and stories and experiences?
So, one of the fastest ways to look at it, if you are connected to your family, take a look at what are some of the experiences that you see repeated within your family. Are
Mm,
there a number of people in your family that are divorced? Are there a number of people in your family who are struggling financially? Are there a number of people in your family that are thriving in their careers and you're not? Then you want to connect with the ancestors to find out, was there something passed down from some other time that is impacting you now? But easily you can go back and just look at your family history or whatever you know, or even the current living relatives, and look at what are some of the patterns that you see taking place. And there are 9 karmic stories that we look at, and you can go through each one of those karmic stories and then look at your family. How is that karmic story playing out in your family? Talk to relatives, ask relatives. I think it's very important that we connect with the elders in our family to find out, what are some of the stories. Listen to their stories and find out what they experienced. And once you do that, you'll be able to tell. That's how you can easily tell on your own. And then you can also go into meditation.
mm.
And there's that way too. You go into meditation and you can connect with the ancestors and just ask those questions. What are some of the challenges? Why are we experiencing these? So that those are some of the ways you can find out.
Fantastic. I think it really is. You make a really good point about talking to the people in our lives, right? I remember I got very interested in genealogy when I was in high school, and I sat down with each of my grandparents. I was fortunate to have a connection with all four of my grandparents, so I have a tape recording, and I learned all kinds of things, like including my granddad had asked my grandmother to marry him twice. The first time she's like, yeah, no, I don't think so. And it was the first time he had told that story. I asked my dad, I said, you know, this is, no, I didn't know that. There's so much wisdom in those who have come before us.
It is so great that you say that. So the book that's right behind me is 10 years of research that my aunt and my mother did, and it's filled with family stories. And it tells the stories of a number of family members, and it's been very helpful for me in clearing the stories, that I need to clear for our lineage, to really look at what were some of the experiences. And it goes back to the 1800s. I mean, they've
Oh,
really done a thorough research. So it's our family history book, and not only is it telling, who's related to who and that kind of thing, but it has those stories. And they spent years interviewing family members, and many of those family members are no longer with us. So I cherish that because we have those stories.
yeah.
And one of the things that I find really fun for families to do is have a wisdom circle with the elders in your family. Bring them together and ask them questions and allow them to just speak and record those, because you learn a lot about yourself and you learn a lot about your family. You learn a lot about, what were some of the traumas and wounds and things that your ancestors had to deal with. What are some of the things that they overcame? you know and they love to share. They love to share those stories.
That's right. You start people talking, and that's something that yeah, that can quickly become a very nice long conversation.
Yes, yes, we did that with a 97-year-old uncle, and just
Oh
let
my
him talk.
goodness.
And I learned so much about his life and history because
Yeah.
of him. And his some of his stories are in the book, and some of them aren't. They're now documented on video. So that's a good.
That's so cool. That's so cool. So, okay, so we need to go to a break, but when we come back, I want to go back to something else that you shared, about the 9 karmic stories that tend to be a thread, that comes through, with the ancestors. All right. So, for now, you're listening to Soul Wisdom Abundance, and when we come back, Dr. Monique and I will chat about karmic stories. So stay tuned. So you're here listening to Soul Wisdom Abundance with me, your host, Jennifer Bloom, and my guest, Dr. Monique Hunt. So we are going to dive into some of the karmic stories, the 9 different karmic stories. But before we do that, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you? So if this is like popping all kinds of things for them, they know how to get in touch with you.
Easy. It's drmonique.com, DrMonique.com. Right there, right at my website.
Super.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay. All right. So let's talk about these 9 karmic stories. So, what, if you will, I'm just going to let you launch into them, because I know that, well, let's hear what they are, and then I've got a couple questions for you.
Okay, great. So abuse, abandonment, addiction, and anger, and betrayal, poverty, violence, grief, and shame. Those are the 9 karmic stories that we look at. And what I find is that usually there are specific karmic stories that show up based on some of the challenges that we're having. So as we're talking about, money here, what I find is the karmic stories that tend to impact, how money flows for us and it impacts our abundance are poverty, obviously,
Yeah.
and shame and addiction. So those are the top 3 that come through. And then that doesn't mean there aren't other karmic stories that impact how money flows to us, But those are the three that, after years of doing this work with my clients, when they express challenges around money, usually those are the top three that show up.
That's fascinating. So, what's your theory about that? Yeah, what's going
Well,
on with like that shame and addiction cycle, right?
yeah, yeah. So, our poverty is obvious,
Well,
but
right, right.
shame really is coming from a place of hiding. I'm ashamed, or sometimes people are so ashamed of the choices that they've made, the experiences that they've had, that they don't want to be seen. So they hide. They hide behind
Yeah.
the shame. And that prevents them from being able to be seen by the people who hold the money, right? Who
That's
will pay us.
yeah, it's fascinating because one of the elements of the money relationship is your relationship with yourself.
Yes.
And if you are not willing to be seen or heard, how can you come to the money table, right? If you're, if you think about the relationship, and I'm sitting at the table with the divine and money, if I don't want to be seen,
Yep.
money and the divine are like, hey, we're happy to help you, but you got the free will, right? Um,
Exactly.
and if you say no, thank you, then we'll go along with that. So
Right.
that's interesting. So okay, so what about addiction?
So addiction is very interesting because addiction can come in many forms. So we often think of, physical addictions or chemical dependencies and those kinds of things. And of course, obviously, those can impact money flow, right? Because people are spending money on things, and they're struggling, or they're not able to focus and think. But there's other addictions too, and there could be addiction to social media that is now preventing you from really being able to express your purpose because you're so caught up in social media. And what I find is, when people are sort of addicted to social media, it's that pick up the phone in the morning, and the next thing you know, 3 hours have gone by and you're still looking at your social media. And oftentimes you're looking at the things that are basically proving to you that there's a reason for you to be shame, reason for you to hide, to not show yourself. It creates anger. So social media is one of the addictions that shows up, that creates some problems. It could be an addiction to procrastination that causes people not to, we often think of procrastination, oh, that's just somebody that's being lazy. But no, sometimes it really is an addiction to staying more comfortable where you are than, or where you believe you will be more comfortable than taking the steps to come out of where you are. And so oftentimes people become addicted to the things that keep them in that place. Television, um, eating, it could be even sex. I mean, so there's these addictions that show up that keep us from taking the steps that we need to take to really express our soul's purpose. And when those show up, and when we're, really addicted to these things, we're not able to focus. We're not able to focus and be our best selves and be really true to ourselves. So that's how addiction shows up.
Okay, yeah. So if okay, so let's say that I'm aware that I have something in my present that is creating an addiction, or I have an addiction of some kind. So tell me how clearing the ancestral stories, or help me understand how clearing those ancestral stories changes that in my present day moment.
Absolutely. So what we do is I connect with the ancestors or the ancestor who has experienced addiction in the same or similar way that the client has. And I'm able to go back 14 generations and really identify those ancestors and allow them to come through and speak and share their stories. And then we work with them to offer forgiveness. We do some energy clearing. We may do some cord cutting. We may do some just expressing if there is a story that needs to be healed. If there isn't a story that needs to be healed, then immediately they start providing spiritual practices, wisdom, guidance that can help you release your addiction to whatever it is that, is keeping you locked in. And what it does is, there's no longer these karmic stories that are the foundation of the choices that you're making around the addiction. So at that point, after we get that information and they share that information, then it's up to the person to say, okay, I'm going to utilize this information to make a change in my life. I'm going to do the spiritual practices because, the biggest part of the work to clear these stories is after we've had the session. Right?
Yeah.
It's not in the session that the biggest work comes in.
You
The
mean you don't do everything for us?
Right, exactly, exactly. I can't do it all. I get the information, I provide the information, and then we have to do these practices. We have to follow the guidance. And honestly, sometimes it may be things that are just crazy. One client, she was having some real money flow issues. It would come in and then she'd hold on so tight, right? And because she was afraid that the money would not there wouldn't be enough and that it would stop. And of course, it was proven to her every time because money is supposed to flow, right? So she's holding on to it, which means now there's none that can flow in because there's a block there. And so her ancestors encouraged her to make soups, because what do soups do? Soups kind of flow, right?
Yeah.
So to make soups and to invite people over to share soup with her, right? To come to her kitchen for soup. Well, what's interesting is just recently she told me that she now is making those soups and selling those
Oh
soups.
my gosh. You
Has
never know.
completely changed her career. She is now selling the soups, has made more money than she's ever made, she said, in her entire life. And she infuses those soups with really good vibrational energy, and she
Mm,
talks to the soups, and she asks that these soups, not only nourish people's bodies but also bring an element of joy and happiness and peace to the people. And not only is she, now making money doing this, but she's been able to feed a number of people who are hungry right now,
oh,
right?
wow.
And so it's very powerful. But at the time I told her about the soups and shared what her ancestors were saying, she was like, I don't even like to cook all that much.
No.
Right?
Y- yeah.
You're right. And so one of her ancestors said, yeah, I understand that, but there is a recipe that your grandmother had. And she was like, yeah, I have that recipe. I've never made it before. And it was a recipe for a soup. And that's how she got started. The ancestors, not everybody's story is exactly like that, obviously, but the ancestors share these practices and these rituals to put into place that help us to really reverse whatever it is that we're feeling is blocking us. In this case, for her, was money. And that's how her story goes.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
fascinating. That's fascinating. I've been thinking a lot recently about those of us who are in the spiritual realm, and we're looking at laws of the universe, and we're connecting with our past, we're connecting with our souls, and we're looking at answers, right? We're looking for answers. It still comes back to our personal choice, right? There's no mantra, affirmation, meditation, whatever, that's ever going to take the place of us making the choice to do something different
Right.
in that next moment, right? To break out of the pattern. I mean, of course, you have to have awareness of the pattern before you can break out of it, right? And that's what this work does. Um, One aspect of the work, right? We get to
Right.
understand what's happening. We get to clear it. We get to clean up those wounds. We get to draw on that strength, but we get to make the choice,
Right. Right. So very
right?
true. That is, and that goes back to, we really have to be in a place when we do this work where we really are ready to do something different,
Yeah.
you know, and we really are ready to say, you know what, the way I've been doing it isn't working. So it's time to
Right?
try something different. Or maybe the way I've been doing it is working, and now I want to try something to make it even better. So it's not always from a place of, oh, everything is falling apart. It could be, you know what, I just want something even better. I want to experience even more joy. So I'm willing to do something different to experience that.
Oh, I
That
love
is
that.
extremely important.
Yeah, that place of expansion, right? Like now I'm ready to really expand into joy, to really expand into abundance. Ooh, wonderful. All right. Well, with that, we need to go ahead and take another break. So, everybody, go ahead and stay tuned. You're listening to Soul Wisdom Abundance on Transformation Talk Radio, and when we come back, let's dig some more into your stories because these are really fascinating.
Sure.
All right. So we'll be back in just a moment. All right, we're back on Soul Wisdom Abundance with me, your host, Jennifer Bloom, and my guest, Dr. Monique Hunt. So this is just fascinating to me, and I have so many questions about all of the different things that we can learn by listening to our ancestors. But I think maybe the best way to learn about it is maybe to hear another story or two, if you wouldn't mind sharing a couple more stories that people have experienced as they've shifted their present day bank accounts.
Yeah. Okay. As they're shifting those bank accounts.
Mm-mm.
Well, I had one client who had some real challenges around betrayal, which of course doesn't show up necessarily in the three stories, but the betrayal was rooted in poverty. And so she herself had experienced a great deal of betrayal, but as well as some of her ancestors as it pertained to money. And so one of her ancestors came through and told her that the person that she was actually getting her guidance from was not the person that she should be getting the information from.
Mm.
That person actually should be getting the information from her.
Oh.
And so this ancestor began to share with us a plan for her to increase her business. And it really included her stepping back and really going within herself and looking at the answers and really telling her, you keep going to all of these experts and these people, and you're getting all of this help, but it's keeping you locked in because you're wanting to follow it exactly the way they're telling you you need to do this. So let us give you a plan. Let us be your coaches.
Wow.
And so they laid out a 5-step plan for her to take her business in a whole different direction.
Mm.
And at first she was like, wait a minute, that's not how I'm being told to do it by this coach and that coach. And I'm like, okay, well, you can continue to do that. And you came to me for a reason. Clearly
Right.
working for you.
Right.
But you can continue to do that. Or you can just try this and see what happens. Try this process. And while you're doing your other things, try this process. See what happens. Give it a chance. She was like, okay, well, let me think about it. I'll try it. And in that process, one of the things was for her to actually go and sit in nature and
Mm.
to sit. And she was to sit by this particular tree on her property for 10 minutes a day, minimum. And what she found after she would walk away from that tree, she found that all of these ideas and downloads and information came that she was missing all along. And she discovered that although there was information that she was receiving from these other people, these leaders and coaches who were doing, great work in their own right, she was able to then kind of take the pieces that worked for her and felt right in her soul, right? And then implement those along with the information that she received from her ancestors to completely take her business into a whole different place. And now her business has come to the point where she's making more money than she's ever made before. But more than that, she's having fun and not working as hard as she was working before.
Oh, that
No, yeah.
so important, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So really what she found is in her family, there was lots of betrayal. In her lineage, lots of betrayal. Well, what we really discovered is that she was betraying herself, right?
Oh, I get
She was
goosebumps when you said that.
She was betraying that information that was coming from inside, and she was pushing it down and not trusting it and believing it. And so once we cleared the betrayal energy, we were able to open up just a whole new world to her.
Absolutely. And and I think that, again, as people, and I'll raise my hand for this. I know that when I first started coming down this path and asking these kinds of questions, bigger questions, there was a lot of looking to the outside, right? You tell me what I need to know. And sometimes that's super important. And because
It
we don't
is.
know,
I don't want to downplay it. Yeah.
we don't know what we don't
Right.
know.
Right.
Other people can give us perspectives, and yet we've got to learn how to trust ourselves. And I think about the time that we're in right now with the pandemic happening and all information coming from all different kinds of places. To be able to develop that core of
Yeah.
trusting yourself and trusting your own personal connection with your divinity, with your soul, is invaluable, right? So that you can at least
Mhm.
test out the idea of, is this mine? Is this something for me? Or is it something that I get to release, right?
Oh, that is so, so important. It's one thing to get information from outside sources, but once you receive that information, you have to really kind of stop and go, okay, what sits right for me? you
Right.
know and the business guidance that you're getting can be very, very valuable. So I don't want to downplay receiving information and learning, and that's very important. As you've said, that's very, very important, and it can really help you grow your business. What's also important is when you receive that information is really connecting with yourself and saying, does this really work for me? Am I really comfortable with this? I have a client who's been told for years that she needs to do video, she needs to do video, she needs to do video. She has an absolutely amazing voice that just brings you in, particularly when she leads her meditations. And she kept saying, I just feel stuck because I'm being told I'll never go anywhere if I don't do video, and I hate video. And we did some work with her ancestors and we did some clearing. And what we discovered is she needed to use her voice, and people didn't need to see her, they needed to hear her.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And once that happened and she started doing more and more audio work, her people started flocking to her. They started
Yeah.
coming to her. So once again, it's, yeah, video is great. It's absolutely fabulous. But if it doesn't sit right for you, then it's not right for you. But what we wanted to make sure of when she came to me was that there wasn't something in her ancestral lineage that was blocking her from being seen. Was it about being seen that was a problem? Was there shame? And there were a few things that we found. There was some shame, there was some betrayal that came up, there was some poverty issues that came up. And so we cleared those. And although now she feels very comfortable with the idea of video, she prefers doing audio work. And so she does podcasts and she does things like that that have really enhanced her business. So it's important that we gather this information and then utilize what really sits right with us. And that's even when we're getting information from the ancestors. If the information that you're receiving in the moment just doesn't feel right, I encourage people to wait. Wait until it does feel right and then do it.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. So, how would you um, advise somebody to start to invite information to come through from the ancestors?
Yes, absolutely. Well, one of the fastest ways, in my opinion, is through your dreams.
Okay.
Ancestors love to communicate while you're sleeping. It's not uncommon for people to have ancestors who have recently passed over to come and visit them while they're sleeping. You hear stories of that often, how the ancestors came while they were sleeping and shared information. That is an opportunity for you to gather so much information from them. So, what you want to do is make sure that the TV's off and there's nothing playing in the background, right?
Hmm.
And you go to sleep at a decent time. And I usually tell people take a little small glass of water, drink a little bit of the water, and then leave the rest of the water out as an offering to the ancestors.
Mm.
Allow yourself to then drift to sleep. And you may even want to write down a question that you have, or and make it kind of general, and when you first start, and then go to sleep. When you wake up in the morning, drink a little more of the water and write down anything that comes to mind. And you may not remember the dream at all. That's okay. Doesn't mean that the information isn't there. It just means
Okay.
that you don't remember it in the moment. Write it down, write down whatever's on your mind. Even, this crazy lady told me to do this. Right? Write whatever comes up for you, and just keep doing that over a period of time, and you'll start to notice that the messages start to come in. And then over time, if you want to ask a specific ancestor, if you want to ask your great grandmother, what would she do in this relationship situation? You can do that. You can ask her that. You can ask that question, and get some answers and some guidance. So that's the fastest way to get started. And then I also have on my website, we talked about, there's also 3 spiritual practices that you can do. There's a book on there, a free book that you can download, and
Oh,
that'll give you a start.
beautiful. Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Wow. There are so many more questions that I could ask, but if there's one last thing that you'd like to share with the listeners, what would you like to share?
I'd like to share this part because I think oftentimes people get stuck here. If you don't know your ancestors, let's say you
Mm,
were adopted, or maybe your parents didn't talk much about your family, or there was a disconnect, it doesn't mean that you can't do this work. What we know is we all had 2 parents.
right.
We have 2 people that created us. And
Right.
so all you have to do is know that, and we can get started doing this work. So you don't have to know your history, you don't have to know that information. We can still do this work and really benefit from it at any level. And the good news is, if you're adopted, you also have the energy of your adoptive parents as well.
Oh,
So that's,
that's
yes.
Oh, that's where there's a whole bunch of other questions, but
Yeah.
I will have to let that
Yeah.
those wait for another conversation. Wonderful. I'm so glad that you said that because we don't all have the benefit of knowing our whole family tree. And my experience with you when we worked together, people came. I mean, and I didn't even. And I have a lot of awareness actually of my family tree, and people were coming and saying things, and it had no. It didn't
Right.
make a difference that I knew my family tree, and such powerful information coming through. So I'm going to encourage everyone to take a look at your work and to start asking the ancestors, because there's just a richness there that we forget to tap into.
There
So,
is.
Dr. Monique, thank you so much
Thank you.
for
Thank you.
being here. It was fantastic to get a chance to talk.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. I love being here with you. I love talking to you, and thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So you right now you're listening to Soul Wisdom Abundance, create wealth through spiritual health on Transformation Talk Radio. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, I've got a couple extra exercises to take people through. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Soul Wisdom Abundance with me, your host, Jennifer Bloom. That was a really fascinating conversation with Dr. Monique. As I was saying at the end of this last segment, there's so much richness that we forget that we can tap into. I am somebody, and I've shared before, one of the paradigms that I use to talk about who I am as a person is soul language, right? And my mission language within that paradigm is pioneer. And I like to go my own way. I like doing things the way I like to do them. And yet there really is this richness to tap into from our ancestral lines that can begin to create shifts in our present day moment. So what I want to do, and the work that I do is different than Dr. Monique's work, but once you start asking about family patterns and thinking about ancestral stories, we can bring that into the present day container and start to look at how it's impacting your habits and your patterns. Um, so what I'd like to do in this last segment is to start to ask a few questions and have you start to begin thinking of the family stories that you already know, and then to do a really short clearing about those stories. Okay, so if you've got a pen and paper, that would be great. Or you can just allow the answers to come up. So if you're someplace where you can close your eyes, I'm going to invite you to do that. Take a couple of deep breaths. And let's just ask a few questions here. So the first question is, when my mother talked about money, it felt like, when my mother talked about money, it felt like, and just fill in the blank there. When my father talked about money, this is what it felt like. When my father talked about money, this is what it felt like. Money's role in my family was, so money's role in my family was, and then let's actually expand it out a little bit. And if you do not have a connection with some of your extended family, substitute the name of somebody else in your family. Okay. So let's ask the question, when my maternal grandparents talked about money, they always talked about, so when my maternal grandparents talked about money, they always talked about, when my paternal grandparents talked about money, this is what they talked about. When when my paternal grandparents talked about money, this is what they talked about. Okay, so then let me ask another series of questions, and I'm just going to suggest that you um, rank these next ones on a scale of 0 to 10. Okay, where 0 is it's not true at all, and 10 is yeah, this is absolutely true. So the first question that I'm going to ask is, money was easy in my family. 0 to 10. 0 not true, 10 absolutely true. I'm just like my family when it comes to money. I'm the exact opposite when it comes to money in my family. I make my money choices independent of my family. Okay. So then just take a couple of deep breaths, and you can open your eyes back up. And if you and I were working together individually, I'd ask a lot more specific questions. But what we really want to do with the information that you gathered is you want to hold the information, that you want to hold on to the stories, you want to hold on to the feelings that are supporting you, and you want to let go of the things that are no longer supporting you. And that sounds like a pretty it's like, how much school did you go to Jennifer, to come up with that piece of advice, right? Hold on to what works and let go of what doesn't. And yet, here's the thing, family patterns have a way of really sitting in us. We want to, many of us, we choose one of two paths. We want to be very loyal to our family. We want to be loyal to the people who raised us. There's that sense of, growing up, you have to be loyal to your family, because otherwise, you're going to be tossed out, right? We need to have that safety of our family net. So we can either go that path of loyalty, or we can sort of be the pioneer, right? Or the black sheep, or right, the rebel in our family, and say, heck no, I want nothing to do with it. And so we end up, pardon the phrase, we end up tossing the baby out with the bathwater. Right? So what I would like us to do is just to do a really short exercise that's going to help to release what no longer serves you, and hold on to what does serve you. And we're going to use the tapping points from Emotional Freedom Technique. So don't worry at all if you don't know this technique. It's a technique based in acupuncture, or acupressure, excuse me, and it's been called emotional acupressure, and so, or psychological acupressure. So what we're going to do is, I just want you to start tapping. You're going to be on the inside end of your eyebrow. You can see me here in the video, and just follow along and repeat after me. I'm becoming aware of all of my family patterns in relationship to money. I enjoy honoring my family. And then under your eye, but I'm ready to walk my own path. Under your nose, I acknowledge the wisdom that's been passed on. And then down to your chin, and I hold on to what serves me. Collarbone, and I release the rest. Under your arm, it's safe for me to release things that no longer serve me. Top of your head, I'm ready to stand clean and pure in my own money relationship. Okay, so just bring your hand down, stop, and take a breath. So what I want you to really walk away from is, we can gather all of the really rich information that our ancestors have to share with us. We get to use their stories, we get to use their healing, and we get to step into our own fresh money relationship. You get to do money how you want to do money. And we can again use the richness of those ancestral stories to be able to create a really rich experience in the direction that you want. All right. There's so much more to talk about here. And if you find that you need some additional assistance to clear those stories, please reach out to me. You can reach me at jennifer@jenniferbloom.com. I'm more than happy to chat with you about ways to help make this work. And please visit Dr. Monique Hunt's website at drmonique.com for more information about ancestors. And then we will call that the end of the episode. Thank you all for being here. I'm so appreciative of you spending your time with me. And you can listen to me here on Transformation Talk Radio the first and third Fridays of every month. And really looking forward to our next conversation, where we're going to talk about being unshakable with money. So until then, I wish each and every one of you prosperous blessings. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.